Hello BookTube, it's Elizabeth, and today I would like to film my July TBR and my June wrap-up. So most of what I read in June was from the public library, so I don't have it with me still. I'm also including the last book that I read in May, which was Matched by Allie Condie. I really enjoyed this book. I really like dystopian type fantasy kind of stories. I read a couple of reviews on Goodreads where the reviewers actually sounded angry that there were similarities of this book to The Giver. Now The Giver is one of my all-time favorite books, so why wouldn't I like a book that has some similarities? Another book I started in May and I finished in June was The Isle of the Lost by Melissa de la Cruz. So it's a fun read about the Disney villains' children and how they are trying to get off of this island that all the villains have been banished to, and they can't use magic. The next one I read is How to Strengthen Your Memory by Michael Fidlow. Now this was an older book, I think published in 1987. My husband had checked it out from the library, and I wanted to read it while he had it out, so I did pick up a few things from it. So the next book I read was The Hobbit, an illustrated edition of the fantasy classic, which in other words means the graphic novel. I have read The Hobbit probably 2 or 3 times. For my reading challenge for this year, I needed to read a graphic novel, and I don't think I'd ever read a graphic novel before, so I found that our library had The Hobbit, and I read that, and it was quite good, and it was beautifully illustrated. It was by Chuck Dixon. The next book that I read was Mrs. Lincoln's Dressmaker by Jennifer Chiaverini. Now I read this for my book club at the public library, and I have read and really enjoyed almost all of Jennifer Chiaverini's books. Now most of her books are part of the Elm Creek quilt series, and they're excellent. I have loved every one of them, and I've read all of them but maybe the most recent 2. I had a more difficult time getting through this book. This was a standalone book, historical fiction novel about a lady named Elizabeth Keckley, who I believe was a real person, and she was Mrs. Lincoln's right-hand person, her modiste. She was the one that dressed her, made clothes for her, and she was a confidant, and it was quite interesting, but I had a hard time getting through it. I feel better for having read it. I feel more educated for having read it, and I have to say that it was not my favorite of the Jennifer Chiaverini books, but I do recommend her as an author, and the Elm Creek quilt series are wonderful. The first book in that series is called Quilter's Apprentice, and you should pick that up. Then the next book I read was because of BookTube, and it was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. And I loved it. I thought it was a fabulous book, and I really do think it would make a good movie. The only problem I have with it really is there seems to be a little bit of confusion about how to classify the book. Now I've heard people on BookTube say it's a new adult book. I agree with that. When I went to check it out from our library, it was classified as a YA book. Well, I didn't think much about it till I started reading it. There's some sex in there, and I don't really think that it should be classified as a YA book, because it's not just alluding to it. I mean, it's there. So, again, it'd make a great movie, but I don't want my 11-year-old reading it. So I, have a little issue there. And the other strange thing is I noticed, and I guess this is the reason for the library's confusion too, is that it's published by a children's publisher. It's not a children's book. I'm here to tell you. So, you go ahead and read it, but don't expect it to be a children's book. Now, the next one I read was The Red Queen. Now, I did have my daughter read that. Actually, she read it for her book club, for the teen book club, and I read it as well, and we both enjoyed it. We loved it. I can't wait for the sequel, and I have to say, I was really blown away by this book. I mean, stuff happened in this book that just blindsided me, and I was on the edge of my seat reading the last few chapters, and at some point, I had to get up and just kind of walk around the house because it was getting intense. So great job, Victoria Aveyard. You did a fabulous job on this book, and I'm looking forward to more from you. So then I started The Wrath and the Dawn in June by Renee Ahdieh, and I finished it on July 2nd. This was really, 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 really good. I have never read the original story of the 1001 Nights, but I knew the basic premise. This book ends with a cliffhanger, so now we have to wait. I also, besides my 6 physical books that I read, I listened to 5 audiobooks. And in my car, I listened to a book called Every Little Thing About You. It is a Christian fiction book based in the 1880s, I think in Texas. This particular one, I think the problem I had with it was the narrator. It had a really strong female protagonist, and yet the narrator was male. Now there were strong male characters too, but I just felt like the male narrator didn't have a grasp on this really strong female character, and he made her sound soft, and I didn't take her to be that. So I think I would have enjoyed this book better if I had actually just read it, so that I could hear the voices in my head rather than someone reading it to me. Next audiobook that I listened to was Fahrenheit 451. I listened to that on Playaway. Does your library have Playaways? Playaways are awesome. Let me show you one. This is basically a little MP3 player. So it's an audiobook, and it's just this book. And you can check this out from the library, put your headphones in, your earbuds, and push play. And you stick it in your pocket. These are excellent for walking around your house, doing housework or whatever. So I get these fairly frequently from the library when I can find something interesting that I want to listen to. And so that was how I listened to Fahrenheit 451. I know a lot of people like Fahrenheit 451. It was not my favorite book either. And I like dystopian kind of futuristic kind of things, but it was just a little too dark and creepy and wordy. I didn't hate it. Just not really what I enjoyed. The next book that I listened to on audio was City of Ashes by Cassandra Clare. Now, I would not have started this series had it not been for BookTube, because when I first started watching BookTube videos, everybody had the Mortal Instruments series on their shelves, and I thought, okay, I'm missing out on something. I don't normally read books with, supernatural, demons, vampires, that kind of thing. I've never read Twilight, but I thought, you know what, I'll give it a try. And I listened to City of Bones in May, I think. My husband also listened to it, and we both enjoyed it. So we finished City of Ashes in June, and again, I did enjoy it. I think the characters are really likable. I like the storyline and the relationships of the characters. So we'll probably continue with the series. And the next one that I listened to on audio was something my husband had checked out, and when he got finished with it, he said, you should probably, you should listen to that too. And it's a nonfiction book called 3 Feet from Gold: Turn Your Obstacles into Opportunities. He's kind of on a power of positive thinking kick right now. We just paid off our house, so he's kind of like looking forward to the next thing, and just trying to figure out where do we go from here. And so he's been reading a lot of that kind of thing. I haven't really been in the mood to read that kind of thing, so I did listen to it, but it seemed a little cheesy to me. The last audiobook I listened to in June was Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. What a fun geek fest of a book. I loved all the 80s pop culture references, mainly because the 80s were most of my high school and all of my college years. So I thought that was fabulous. And now, I have to say though, I don't like foul language in a teen book, so I knocked a star off for that. I thought it was a fabulous story. The author even tells you at the beginning how it's going to end, but the journey to get there is just fabulous. So I loved the book, and I thought it was a lot of fun. The coolest thing was the audiobook was read by Wil Wheaton. So that made the little random reference to Wil Wheaton that was in the book hilarious when I hear Wil Wheaton talking about Wil Wheaton of the future, who was like an old geezer or something, and it was really, really cute. Made me laugh out loud. So for July, I am listening to on audio The Red Pyramid, which is by Rick Riordan. It's the first in the Kane Chronicles. So I think in May I finished the last of the Heroes of Olympus books. And I had to have some more Rick Riordan because I love Percy Jackson books, love the Heroes of Olympus, and I might love these too. So I picked this up at the Scholastic book sale, but I had already had this on hold at the library. It took me a while to get it. So I was like, well, which one should I do? So I've been listening to it, although I think I probably will go back and read it in the physical book. The other book that I have already started is for my book club at the public library, and it is by Julia Glass, called The Widower's Tale. Now, I have to tell you, I'm about a third of the way into this book, and ugh, it is not my type of book. Now, it may be your type of book. I'm not saying it's a bad book. It's just not my type of book. Now, for July, my TBR, I've actually already finished 2 other books. I read them completely from start to finish yesterday. So, well, I take that back. I started this one the night before, but I got really sleepy, and so I really read the majority of it the next morning. This was one I picked up for $1 at a thrift store. I'm always looking for ways to improve my reading speed. Very basic. It's written for kids, but it's a decent book. And I had to read a book for my reading challenge that was published in the year I was born, which is 1964. Now, I looked at Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and I looked at Harriet the Spy. I even have Harriet the Spy, and I was going to read that, but I've already started it on audio. And one of my self-imposed limits to my reading challenge is that it cannot be books that I have already listened to on audio. It can't be books that I've already read at some point in my life. And also, I have to have a different book for each of the 50 categories. So I thought, one of my other goals is that I've been doing for several years now is trying to read all the Newbery winners. So I looked at the 1964 Newbery winner, and it was published in 63. So I went to the 1965 Newbery winner, and guess what? It was published in 1964. It's called Shadow of a Bull, and it was very quick and easy to read. It was only about 150 pages, and there were some illustrations throughout, so it was very fast. And even though I'm not a very fast reader, I was able to finish this pretty much yesterday morning. I just gave this book 3 stars, but I did really enjoy it. When I first started it, I thought, oh, I don't know if this book is really for me. I have no interest in bullfighting, and it's kind of gruesome. But I powered through it. Well, towards the end, I really started to see what the story was about. So if you ever want to read this book and you don't want to hear spoilers, then mute the sound for a minute while I just tell you what this book really turned out to be about was the coming to the maturity to realize that you need to make your life choices about what you think is best for you, not what everyone else thinks is best for you. Now, that being said, there were some surprises in here. It wasn't completely predictable. So I thought that was interesting. But there was a quote towards the end of the book that one of the important characters said to the main character of Manolo. He said, in the end, remember, in the end, it's just between you and God. And I was like, you are absolutely right. That is a good statement, worth reading the book for right there. So I would recommend this book, and if you want to read Newbery books, then this is one of them. And it's from 1964, which is the year of my birth. So for my 2015 reading challenge, I just started reading Christy by Catherine Marshall. Now, I remember watching Christy not too long after I moved out on my own, I think, and I really kind of felt a connection. So it's been sitting on my shelf waiting to be read, and one of the challenges on my reading challenge is to read a book that is over 500 pages. Guess how many pages this has? 501. So it fits perfectly, and it allows me to get something off my TBR and still fulfill an element of my reading challenge. The other book that I have already started is The Postman by David Brin. I love post-apocalyptic type stories, and this movie is probably my favorite Kevin Costner movie, and I didn't even really know till recently that it was based on a book. And again, with my reading challenge, another one of the categories is to read a book that is set in the future. So this is going to be it. I'm reading this one. The next book that I have ordered from the library that I'm going to read for my reading challenge is a classic romance. So I was kind of thinking, what books would I read? Some of the really older ones that I like, I've already read, so I can't read them for my challenge. And I thought, what's more classic to me than love story itself? Now, it's not, ancient, but it's from, 1970. I think it would be something that I would be interested in reading. And my sister, I was talking to her on the phone, and I asked her if she had read it, and she didn't remember for sure if she had read it, but she was really into the movie, and I remember that was probably the second movie that I recall her ever dragging me to was Love Story. I do have here the sequel, which is Oliver's Story, and I may read it eventually if I like Love Story. Next book that I want to read, or plan to read for July, is Crossed, the sequel to Matched. I just bought this at the Scholastic book sale, and I'm really, really looking forward to reading it. So I'm going to get to that in July. Now, for nonfiction for July, I plan to read The Horse Boy, A Father's Quest to Heal His Son. Now, this book was recommended to me by a coworker maybe a couple years back because they knew that I had a daughter with autism, and I came across this book at a book sale back, I think, in February, and I had it on the shelf. My husband saw it, and he's already read it, so I need to get to it. And also, it fulfills on my reading challenge to read a book that is based on a true story. Another just kind of fun book I am going to read by Louis Sachar. Now this is a sequel, but I am going to read Sideways Stories from Wayside School. It was recommended to me by someone at the thrift store. And later on, when I was looking for books for my reading challenge, one of the items is to read a book that was later made into a TV series. And guess what? There was a TV series based on Wayside School. Then if I get all of that read, and still have any time left in the month, I plan to read the one and only Ivan, and I don't know who that's by. But it is a Newbery winner, so it's one of the more recent ones that I have not read. And for my book reading challenge, I have to have a book with non-human characters, and it's about a gorilla. So that is my TBR and my wrap-up for June. So hope you'll subscribe. I look forward to doing more videos and hearing from you in the comments. In the meantime, read a good book, and God bless you.